Hello and welcome to episode 223 of the Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Shane, here in Denver, Colorado, and with me on the line from, I'll do Chicago, Illinois first this time. It's the Godfather, Dave Harbacher.
Whoa, guess who got a promotion this week? It's me.
It's you, buddy.
It's your boy Dave. I'm back from a road trip and all that kind of stuff.
What did we do last week? Was it just
spoilers.
Me and Stan?
You and Stan doing spoilers.
Oh,
yep.
man. Yeah, just so it was episode 222, so
yep.
Just the two of us was perfect. But now there's 223, and the third person here is from Massachusetts, Devon O'Donnell.
I don't know why you put the s in the show notes. But...
Oh, I was just like, I had to remember. I don't remember how to spell it, so I just typed random
okay.
characters.
Just some random letters.
But also, Devon, you just let everybody know that we don't, all of our bits are scripted. All of this is written. Our writers are non-union. I'm just kidding. Of course, we would be union people. But we
broke the strike line. We're scabs.
We do put the jokes in the notes sometimes, and then when I read them later, I'm like, that joke's not funny. I'm not going to do it anymore. And then it's even funnier when I realize it's not funny.
Well, see, if you write a joke, you have somebody else proofread it, right? So then if they think it sounds bad, then you're just like, okay, we'll just leave that out, you know?
Yep.
Saves us the trouble of going in and editing it out in the second after we talk about it, you know?
Exactly, and that is what my actual job is like, Devon, if you can imagine. That's a lot of what it is. Having somebody else look at it and telling me that it's bad.
Devon, I feel like it's only been a few weeks since you've been on, but with your regular cadence of guesting now, I just feel like it's been so long. How have you been?
I've been good. Yeah, we got to, Mother's Day was this weekend. I actually did two separate Mother's Day dinners. We had one with my mom and my grandma, and then one with just me and my mom. So,
that's awesome.
It's pretty good.
Did everything good?
Yeah, we went to this Italian place, and I had braised short rib ravioli.
Yeah,
with marsala sauce. It was so good.
I'm a pescatarian, so I eat the fish, not the meat. But braised short rib is on my short list of meat products that I do miss. Fried chicken and like braised, Korean short ribs, things like that. So good.
I do feel like there was a minute about 15 years ago where all of a sudden short rib was everywhere.
Yes.
And I don't know if it was just that I finally became an adult when I realized short rib was an option and I could get it and it would be good, or if it was just like a trend that took off. But yes, I find myself every time I go to an Italian restaurant now, short rib is the way to make it work.
It's the Brussels sprout of meat. It's everywhere now.
I usually have short rib with Brussels sprouts. Amazing. And what do we have this week to go with our short rib and Brussels sprouts?
Well, we got some weirdness. I mean, it's not that weird.
So when I wrote this intro, again, writing the jokes into the script, Devon, I was like, this episode is so strange because we're going to look at Saturday's Modern Challenge, which was actually kind of weird. But maybe really what we're going to do is Moto was messed up this weekend. Am I right,
man.
guys?
Yeah.
What a stink.
Well, okay.
What a stink.
So the weekend, it wasn't too bad, but I had all these plans to play 3 different decks today. We were going to talk about all of them. And then I get an hour into my stream and somebody in my chat posts a link and they're like, hey, Magic Online's going down in an hour. And I didn't believe them. I thought they were joking. And yeah, they just planned an emergency downtime that lasted, I think, about 5 hours. So we didn't even get to play those decks today. So.
What a pooper.
And then, we couldn't get cards, right, Shane?
Yes. Yeah, I was trying to get some Ob Nixilis Flample Dragon. I forget his actual title, official Ob Nixilis title.
Captive Kingpin.
Captive Kingpin. So yeah, I ended up getting some very late last night. But then, it's late, and I go to bed, and then I wake up, and I go to work. And then Magic Online's down anyway. I get home from work, I get home as early as possible, and then I'm like jumping on the computer, opening up Magic Online, and it's like, wow, what the stink.
Nope, not today, Shane.
That's right.
Not happening. So, I mean, we spent our time diving in to the wild world of challenges, what's happening on Magic Online, the aftermath of Aftermath.
Yeah, and even, there's all this stuff. People are like, Aftermath is a flop. It's terrible. There's not too many cards that we've seen appear from the set so far, but we do have a few to talk about this week. So we're just going to look at those across Pioneer, Modern, and also, honestly, we're not done processing March of the Machine.
Not at all. We got some housekeeping. Let's get through that. It should be pretty quick. We have a new patron Yaron or Jaron O with a cool line through it. Thank you for becoming a citizen of the Dive Down Nation. O with a line through it person. We have a Patreon out there. If you want to help keep us going, if you want to support us, if you want to get some swag sent your way, you can go to patreon.com/thedivedown. We/I, and Dave did too. Dave sent the playmats out.
And also spent months relentlessly bothering you.
Yes. Well,
And
I bothered you to get. We had to get new tokens made.
Yeah.
We had to get new pins made. It was a combination of factors in terms of mutual bugging to get this moving forward. So I sent a bunch of stuff out. People have been reporting. I've seen some boxes being delivered on the pirate ship. Shipping sheet, and so a bunch of people should be getting some stuff. Then we're getting through the international folks as well. The new tokens are sick. And the new pins are great. We're going to get some photos of those up soon so people can see kind of the updated swag.
But let me tell you, these new tokens, Devon, I don't think we showed them to you. So they're pixel
I didn't
art.
see 'em.
They're pixel art like the Rhino Boys.
Okay.
And one of them is me as a treasure. So I'm on a crown.
Well,
with
you're the king
I'm
and
a
the
king.
treasurer.
I'm a king on a throne surrounded by coins, and there's a white monkey. We'll call him Ragavan's
Ragavan?
cousin, I guess. I don't want to call. I don't want to say, but it's not R.I.P. And then so that's the treasure token, and then Shane as a construct.
I'm piloting the construct.
Yes, so Shane is in he looks like a Final Fantasy boss.
What's
in
the
a
sword?
construct.
Do I have Cauldra?
Complete. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also the gingerbread man makes an appearance. And then finally Stan, of course, is on a rhino.
Yes.
But
He's riding the rhino.
In classic Stan fashion.
Exactly.
Yeah, as Stan does.
But that rhino has a Blood Moon Rising in the background,
yeah.
if you know what
Yes.
I'm saying. So we're doing
Yeah,
it.
they're sweet. Patreon.com/thedivedown. We also have a store. If you don't want to do the regular Patreon thing, you can buy some swag over at thedivedown.com/store. If you play Magic Online, you can use Mana Traders to rent your online cards. The Dive Down 2023 gets you 10% off your first 2 months there. Our buddies over at Barrister and Man, 15% off your first order at Barrister and Man. Shaving soaps, grooming products of all kinds. The Dive Down 2023. And our friends over at Nerd Rage Gaming give you 8% off your order just for being a listener with the code DIVE8. So, Dave.
Yeah.
Let's get into this episode.
That's right. Let's do it.
We've got a few. What we thought we'd start with first is, we have Devon here.
Yep.
Devon plays a lot of Magic, and I thought it would be fun. Devon's waving. The listeners at home cannot see this.
The YouTubers can now.
Yeah, YouTubers can. So, Devon, first off, I think you were saying you've been playing some Pioneer. What have you been into lately?
The one that I have been enjoying the most would be the Boros deck.
Ooh, the Boros Tokens?
So this is actually a deck that kind of was conceptualized from a Spike deck. So Spike was actually playing this in Modern with Knight Errant of Eos. And what he did is he took, he had Memnite, Ornithopter, paired that with the 8 copies of Kuldotha Rebirth, because Rebirth and then plus Gleeful Demolition itself, and then pairing all that stuff with the Convoke cards. And I was looking at the deck list, and I figured most of it was Pioneer legal anyways. Unfortunately, we don't have access to Memnite, and we don't have access to Kuldotha Rebirth. But what you do have is you have the same core. So you have Ornithopter, Thraben Inspector, and Voldaren Epicure, which turn on Gleeful to make tokens. You're powering out the Convoke cards with those tokens. We have 4 Venerated Loxodon, 4 Knight Errants of Eos, and then you have this Reckless Bushwhacker package with Burning Tree Emissary, Bushwhacker itself, and then, Legion Loyalist to kind of help push through some damage. I've been really impressed with this deck. I've had, I posted a 5-0 on Twitter, had a couple 4-1s with it. There was a prelim, somebody, I think 3-1 or 4-0 a prelim with it, somebody 5-0 to league with it. So I've been loving this deck.
Okay. So I already forgot what Knight Errant of Eos does, and so I pulled it up. And so this is the 4 and a white Convoke 4/4 human knight. When it ETBs, you look at the top 6 cards of your library. You reveal up to 2 creature cards with mana value X or less from among them, where X is the number of creatures that convoked Knight Errant of Eos. Put the revealed cards in your hand, then shuffle. So, for example, let's say you use 4 creatures to convoke it, right? Then you look at the top 6 cards, and each of the creature cards can be mana value 4 or less, not a combined mana value, right?
Right.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, so you look at top 6, and then you get, 2 creatures with 4 or less, or ideally you want to get to 5 most of the time so you can hit the other convoke cards. But yeah, I mean, there are some spots where you're really just looking for a bushwhacker, and then you can just do it for 3, because you're always looking at 6 deep. That's the nice part. It's like, even if you only tap 1 creature, you're still looking at 6 cards. So, it's really flexible in that regard. And then you have like the Luxodons to help push a lot of damage and get you past, get through those final points of damage too. So it's been good.
Yeah, so what's it end up looking like typically? Like, are you trying to maximize the Knight Errants and the Venerated Loxodons? Or are you just kind of like, hey, whatever fits this board state, I'm happy with?
Yeah, I mean, essentially any hand with Gleeful and Ornithopter, those are the cards you want to see in your opening hand combined the most. Those are the most explosive starts, where you can say go like turn 1 Ornithopter, Gleeful it, make 3 goblins, and then turn 2 you have 3 creatures plus 2 lands. That's already 5 mana to play a convoke card. So if maybe you play like another 1-drop and then you have 4 creatures in a land, you can still cast the convoke card. But even without those draws, you can still go like, Thraben Inspector on 1. Maybe like there's also Forbidden Friendship. I forgot to mention this card, but this is red and a colorless sorcery. Make a 1/1 red haste creature and a 1/1 white soldier token. The important part about that is it makes a white creature. So you don't have a ton of actual white creatures besides Thraben Inspector to convoke the convoke cards out. So making a white creature off of Forbidden Friendship is very important because you have a high density of red creatures, but not as many white creatures. So that's important as well.
So you're not relying entirely on your mana to do the white pip of your convoke creatures. You really do want to use the creatures themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
Okay.
then Thraben Inspector and Friendship help that out a lot.
I just want to be playing Hordling Outburst in this deck because it takes me back. I want 3 goblins for 3 mana.
That's below rate these days, my friend.
I
Too
just feel
expensive.
I feel like Ornithopter plus Gleeful Demolition is like build your own Hordling Outburst, but yeah, it does in fact only cost 1 red mana that way.
So Devon, is this deck just super aggro? Is that what it feels like, or or is it okay? That's what it's about. Explosive starts. It's not about. I mean, even maximizing the convoke cards or 5 drops and are like Knight Errant is a little grindy, right? It gets you more cards. Venerated Loxodon is just kind of big, right, and makes your creatures big. That's kind of what it feels like. It's just like, oh my god, turn 3, I have 20 power on the board or something like that.
Right, you could imagine a draw that's like turn 1 Ornithopter Gleeful, 3 1/1s, and then even if you don't have any other creature, you just go land 2 mana plus the 3 tokens, make Loxodon. That's 10 power on turn 2. Like, right. If you're on the play, there's not a lot of decks that can beat that kind of start.
Yeah.
I found myself frequently sideboarding out some copies of the Ranger, the Knight Errants in the faster matchups because a lot of the times you don't want to use you don't want to use your creatures that would normally be dealing damage to draw more cards because you need to be faster in those matchups.
Right.
But you can afford to do it with Loxodon because you're putting more power in place. So you're kind of getting that damage back. But yeah, it's just like you just want to go as fast as possible with this deck.
So what do you think this is good against then? So it's good against mono green, I'm assuming, because of the speed, or how's that working out?
Yeah, so this deck has a really fast Goldfish, so I've been pretty happy with the Mono Green matchup, the Lotus Field matchup, just anything that you're trying to race. Even Greasefang, one nice thing about Greasefang is Loyalist. The ability makes it so tokens can't block, so their 4/4 angels won't be able to block if you have Loyalist.
As a side note, what's going on with green these days? Like my understanding is that green is back in a big way. I don't mean to interrupt this, but I feel like if we're talking about Pioneer, we should be talking about maybe the resurgence of green for a minute or two. Is it really all just like Pelucranos and like how well Pelucranos can shore up, especially the Greasefang matchup, and I guess maybe like Spirits and other flyers? Like, what's going on here?
Well, it's actually funny because if you look at some of the results, like just the average result over the past couple of weeks based on like challenge top 8s and stuff like that, Rakdos is far and away the most played deck. I think the challenge this weekend, I think there were 14 copies out of 32, so almost 50%.
Good Lord.
Yeah, Rakdos is everywhere. There's still a bunch of green, and I think part of the reason that green has such a big resurgence lately is it's structurally like decent against Rakdos. It has a lot of permanents that are harder for Rakdos to answer. Like you can't trade 1-for-1 with a lot of green's cards, and that's what Rakdos wants to do. So I think the reason for green being so dominant or more people are playing green lately is because of that resurgence of Rakdos.
No, makes sense. So you think the speed here is still good enough to beat the current iterations of green?
Yes, I think this deck is really favored against anything that you want to race. So Greasefang, Green, Lotus Field, stuff like that. I have been struggling against Rakdos. I actually played this in the challenge. I lost to Rakdos 3 times. I went 0-3 drop, and I lost to Rakdos all 3 times.
Oh,
I need
nice.
to figure out how to fix that matchup. But and that's kind of tough because Rakdos is the most played deck. But we could try some different stuff, and maybe there are avenues to approach that. Like I have winning announcements in this sideboard, but I haven't actually been happy with them against Rakdos because this is only an 18 land deck, and actually getting to 3 mana is kind of tricky sometimes.
All right, Devon. So this is an awesome deck to see. I loved seeing this brew pop up on Twitter at the end of the week last week and over the weekend. I was like, whoa, what is Devon doing? What are all these things? It's really too bad that there isn't another Bushwhacker style kind of effect in this, but I guess Loxodon is essentially that, and it's permanent, right?
Yeah, that's like the weird thing about this compared to the modern version is you have 4, like the modern version gets to play 8 zeros, 8 bushwhackers, and 8 gleeful's, and this deck gets basically loses one of each of those, so you cut that down in half. But I think the power level of Pioneer is significantly lower than the power level of Modern, so it's kind of scaling in that regard. And I think this has what it competes. As long as we can figure out the Rakdos matchup, this is definitely a contender, I think.
That's awesome. All right, where do we want to go next in Pioneer? Do we want to talk about the card that is bizarrely spiking on Magic Online right now because of lack of availability? Or do we want to go somewhere a little bit different?
Are you referring to the Kingpin himself?
I am referring to the Kingpin himself.
We can go to the Kingpin.
Yeah,
Shane, you want to talk about your Kingpin?
Sure. I mean, I'll just remind people what this thing does. It's the 2 black and a red Ob Nixilis creature version. He's a flying trampled demon, and whenever one or more opponents each lose exactly 1 life, put a 1/1 counter on Ob, exile a top card of your library. Until your next end step, you may play that card. You just have to read this a little bit more carefully. It's a 4/3, by the way. And so, you look at this and you're like, okay, well, if I make my opponent lose life, then I'll get a card and get to play it. But it's each time, whenever one or more of your opponents each lose exactly 1 life, we play 60 card constructed here. So when your opponent loses exactly 1 life, so we talked about this last week, and there's one deck in particular that's really good at making your opponent lose exactly 1 life, and it's Rakdos Sacrifice.
It's got a lot of ways to do that. So yeah, we have Cauldron Familiar in this particular list that we're looking at. I believe this was I think this was a League 5-0 or a Prelim 4-0.
This is a Prelim 4-0 by Chi that we're looking at. I found 2 events as of Saturday. So one is a Prelim 4-0 by Chi and a Prelim 3-1 by Shadows 2005, which send my soul to God if this person was born in 2005 and is already on Magic Online. But I guess, I'll be at the old folks' home.
It's only 18, Dave, by the way.
I know that's an 18-year-old.
I think they're a Zoomer, so.
Yeah. So yeah, those are the lists that we're looking at right now.
Yeah, so this particular deck list that we have, in order to trigger the Ob Nixilis, you have Cauldron Familiar, which your opponent loses a life. Voldaren Epicure, which is deal 1 damage to your opponent, and then obviously the Mayhem Devil, which is the big one here. So you have essentially 12 ways to turn on Ob Nixilis, and in the case of Cauldron Familiar and Mayhem Devil, you don't even have to spend mana on it. Basically, if you have a familiar in an oven and you play an Ob Nixilis, you can sack the familiar, sacrifice the food, get back the familiar, triggers the Ob Nixilis. And then if you also have Mayhem Devil and all of that, you can basically trigger it 4 or 5 times in a single turn. And that's super, super powerful. And the fact that it has flying and trample, it's really hard to block that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a finisher. It's a real finisher.
You know what this card reminds me of? I think this is going to make you laugh, Shane. This is the best Butcher of the Horde ever. That's what this card reminds me of when I look at it. I was like, this is Butcher of the Horde. I mean, it's not its own sack outlet, but it does the thing that you wanted to do in those old Mardu decks. Just, when you work around it, and a giant flying trample creature that lets you play extra cards is wow. Okay.
Yeah, the card advantage potential here is really extreme. I do have a few. Devon, how many games or matches, leagues of this did you get in?
So, On Friday, I was able to acquire 3 copies because I borrowed them from a friend of the stream.
Yeah.
So I played 1 league on Friday, and then, funny enough, actually today, which we didn't, because we didn't get to some of the decks that I wanted to, we ended up booting up Arena, and I had all the cards for this. We played, I think we played like 5 matches on Arena, so I want to say I'm about 10
Sweet.
matches in. Now, the one thing that I will say, Ob Nixilis, super powerful card. When you're doing the thing, you play it with a cat in an oven or a Mayhem Devil and some treasures. It's awesome. The one, talking about the deck's strengths and weaknesses, Rakdos Sacrifice, deck that wants to generate a lot of value in these like kind of incremental card advantage type ways.
Yeah.
Very, very good against the other mid-range decks, very bad against Greasefang. Maybe not Greasefang, but Mono Green, Lotus Field, decks that want to that aren't interacting, that try to go faster. Ob Nixilis being a 4-drop that doesn't immediately it doesn't have haste or anything like that, doesn't really help you in your bad matchup. So my kind of assessment is it's only good against the decks that you should already be good against.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think it might be more of a sideboard card or like 1 copy in the main deck type thing.
Yeah, I was thinking that when I was playing in the few like matches I got in before I had to go to bed last night, which was like, I'm already doing the thing. Like when I'm set up in that fashion, like if I have a Mayhem Devil, if I'm even doing Cat Oven stuff, if I'm churning through my deck with like Deadly Disputes and claiming the Firstborn and all that kind of good stuff, and like my deck is already winning in a lot of ways, and I feel like Ob Nix really is, I'm not going to call it a win more, but it definitely is like sort of the cherry on top. And I don't know, like you said, is like how essential is it to the core of the strategy? It's the same reason that I think not everyone's running like Corvold, the Fakehurst King. Everyone's not pushing into Jund for that kind of finisher, is because it's not really essential to get into that. And I'm curious how Ob's going to feel in terms of its essential nature.
Devon, what card is Ob Nixilis replacing when you think about this shell?
It's mostly replacing the flex spot. So at least when I played Rakdos, which was a few months ago, I was playing a lot of it in practice for RCQs and stuff like that. The Thoughtseize were mostly in the sideboard, but what it's replacing is like the 1 Croxa, the 1 copy of Village Rites, the 1 copy of like extra copy of Eden Alive, these 1 of flex spots. So it's mostly just taking up those, 1 of spots that might be dedicated for other things. And also, I think the Ob Nixilis list, most of them are on 23, I believe. 16, 20. No, this one's only on 22, I think, right?
22 lands?
This one's on 22.
Yes.
Because I remember Todd Anderson posted on Twitter, he tried, I think, 3 Obs and 23 lands, which, when you're adding a 4-drop, kind of makes sense to add a land too.
Yeah, I feel like this deck does have pretty good ways to find lands, like with Deadly Dispute and Blood Tokens if you're using them to like churn through your deck, and Fable of the Mirror Breaker doing some cycling. But yeah, I can definitely see the argument for going into more lands, because the flex spots in this deck to me felt like, do I want more removal? Like what kind of removal do I want? Do I want like the Annihilating Glare, I believe it's called, right? Where it's like the sacrifice, kill a planeswalker or a creature thing. And I found myself up against some particularly powerful creatures that get played a lot in this format, like Shieldred. And it's like, unless I'm, sandbagging my fatal pushes or glares for Shieldred and Shieldred only, like I have 4 pieces of main deck removal, if you're not counting like the Blood Tithe Harvesters, like sacrificing themselves and stuff like that. But it's, it can be a little bit bumpy if you're up against like certain types of opposing decks where you're like, well, am I really holding the ground unless I have like Cat Oven to be blocking and sacking and all that kind of good stuff. So I felt like, I think Dave's getting an interesting point, which is like, what am I removing for this? And that could be bad. Like you could be removing things that you want to have access to. And I guess that's what sideboards are for, I suppose. But I don't know. Like I'm into it, but like I'm also just kind of like I said, is I'm not immediately sold about this is the new way to build this deck. But I also think this deck is not such a tier 1 thing that it doesn't have a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, I think the Corvold comparison is basically perfect, because people, when Rakdos Sacrifice, like people were trying different versions of Jund and stuff, a lot of people were playing Corvold, but then the format started to get faster and the format sped up, and there's a lot of like non-interactive decks, and people realized that you can't do that kind of stuff against the Lotus Field and this kind of stuff. And Ob Nixilis feels, while it's more powerful than Corvold, it feels like it's in that same spot where it's 4 mana value type card. You need to untap with it, yada yada. So, good card, but I don't think it's helping the matchups that you need help in.
Do you think that there are other ways that this card could like be doing something better? Like, I have a really hard time imagining where you would get more single life loss triggers from your opponent to take advantage of it. But like, do you think like it doesn't belong in this particular shell, and maybe there's something that's more all in on it?
Well, it's funny you asked that, Shane. We didn't put this in the notes, but somebody in I don't know if it was somebody in Spike's chat brought this up, but this actually goes infinite with all will be one. You know, remember that enchantment? The one that combos with Quest.
Yeah.
So this is a Pioneer legal combo that you can play both of those. Now you need a way to turn it on, and you would still probably end up playing like Witch's Oven Cauldron Familiar. But I think what you would do is you would also play Oni Cult Anvil, because that enables the combo for 1 or 0 mana. You can just basically like play the Ob Nix, play the All Will Be One, and then try to go off from there. You want ways to immediately set up the kill the turn that you play the All Will Be One. I don't know. Again, it's 5 mana enchantment, not the best stuff that you want to be doing against the fast decks. But the nice thing about it is it does end the game on the spot. Whereas Ob Nixilis might need like a turn or two to attack with it. You play All Will Be One and you have an Ob Nix in play, they're just dead right there. So that could be something as well.
That card, I have a feeling that we're going to be saying that card's name for years in situations like this, where it's like, it's 5 mana, but it goes infinite with it. Like, because there's even a standard combo I remember that Frank Karsten shared with everybody when that card was spoiled. And like, yeah, I just think we're going to be looking out for Splinter Twin situations with All Will Be One for a long, long time because of the way that is written. All right, but maybe Ob Nixilis Captive Kingpin not worth the 100 ticket price that it is zooming towards as Magic Online tries to work out its problems with inventory.
It was like 23 yesterday.
Yeah, it's going all over the place.
Looks like it's at about 35 right now. But
there you go.
You know what? There is another card, maybe not quite, worth quite as many tickets, but because it's only an uncommon, but there is a card that I really do think is going to make a huge shakeup in Pioneer once people start getting their hands on them, and that is Coppercoat Vanguard.
Okay.
So
you're a believer,
for the listeners. Oh, I'm a believer of this card. I played 2 leagues with this
this
deck
one,
today,
yes. This is cool.
God, this Coppercoat Vanguard is absolutely sick.
So Stan was right.
Stan's always right?
I also think we're going to be surprised. We're going to talk about Coppercoat Vanguard in Modern, too. It showed up in a lot of places. But anyway, not to scoop us.
Yeah. So for the listeners who don't know, this is colorless and a white for a 2/2 that gives all of your other humans, it's a human itself, but it gives all of your other humans +1/+0 and ward 1. So basically, this is it's essentially like a split card or a meld, I guess, if you will, of Thalia's Lieutenant plus actual Thalia, just kind of stapled onto one card, because you get the taxing effect plus you also get the Lord effect. But it's just like the fact that you get both of those on one card on a 2-drop, it just does so much. And like in combination with Thalia, like if you curve Thalia into Coppercoat, they now have to spend like 3 or 4 mana to cast their removal spell. Like what are they even supposed to do about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like a really strong Lord on its face. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of like Kira Great Glass Spinner too, or something like that, where it's like, okay, whatever removal spell I use, I have to use to kill the Vanguard, which is going to keep you from killing all my other creatures. And, I don't want to get too deep into it on other things, but of things in Modern that have multiple targets per spell that are aligned with human emotions. But, this card... Fury. Fury. But so what are they playing? What do they cut from these lists? So we're looking at a Mono White Humans list from the challenge by My13. What is on the bubble now for Mono White Humans now that Coppercoat Vanguard is here?
So from this particular list, it looks like they have decided to... Was that trimming on copies of Luminarch Aspirant? Okay, so we got 4 Bodyguard. I think that's 2 Giant Killer, 2 Aspirant, 4 Hopeful, 4 Coppercoat, 4 Lieutenant, 4 Thalia, 4 Brutal, 3 Officer, 3 Adeline, 2 Knight Errant, 2 Brave. So they've cut down on... They've trimmed on Luminarch Aspirant. They've cut the main deck ossifications. It looks like they've also shaved an Officer and a 3rd Brave to make room for Vanguards and some extra 1-drops of the Giant Killers.
Yep.
I've also seen lists that have cut Brutal Cathar entirely from the main deck, swap that for Vanguard and just put the Vanguard or put the Brutal Cathars in the sideboard, which I actually think I like that better because Brutal Cathar is not that great against Rakdos anyways, given the fact that they have Stomp.
I think we're also overlooking. It looks like Knight Errant of Eos is also in these decks now, just kind of like stock, two or three of.
Yeah, and with the rise in Rakdos, that makes a lot of sense, right? If you get into a spot where you have like 2 or 3 creatures in play, if they kill your first couple, and then they end up playing a Shieldred, your 2 or 3 creatures can't attack past that. So being able to utilize those to then cast a Knight Errant to help find more gas to like help overcome the Shieldred is really nice as well.
Yeah, and then there's also some people trying out black-white humans now, which is, I think there's a strong core in Pioneer of that, but the cards that they're adding are things like Bloodsoaked Champion. I know, I love this card. Memories, right, Shane? Bloodsoaked Champion. We have General Kudro of Drannith, and then we also have Arena Dauntless General from the new set. And if you forgot what Arena does, or Girina, not Arena, right?
Girina. I don't even know how to pronounce that still.
Yeah, I don't know. East Coast, Midwest, we're always going to pronounce those kinds of words differently because we have different syllable emphasis. So this card Shane and Stan talked about last week, and it says it's a 2/2 for a black and a white, and it says when Girina Dauntless General enters the battlefield, exile target player's graveyard, sacrifice Girina. Humans you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So it's more buffing kind of and more protection for your cards, but also giving you a little bit of that kind of exile clause as well. So it's kind of like your selfless spirit plus a graveyard exile on a creature, which I think is just good utility. And if you're going to go this way, presumably to be able to get General Kudro, to play Dire Tactics is just an all kind of removal spell.
The one thing that I really like about this deck as well is you mentioned Dire Tactics. Like, if you look at the traditional mono-white decks, they have to get to a card like Ossification to kill a Shieldred, and this is just like a much cleaner card. It's instant speed, so I really like that as well. And then General Kudro, people forget that has that additional line of text that just blows up creatures, another answer to Shieldred, and just like, so I think that's the question we have to ask ourselves is the juice worth the squeeze in the Black Splash? Because you do sacrifice a little bit with the mana base. You have to play, some lands that might come into play tap sometimes, like the classic turn 4 Concealed Courtyard, but overall, I'll have to try a little bit of both to see which one I like better, but Coppercoat Vanguard has been an absolute house in the 2 leagues that I played. I played the mono white version, but it's been great.
Fascinating.
So quick question here. Is it kind of like doing double duty where it's like sort of like a Thalia's Lieutenant and sort of like a Thalia Guardian of Thraben? And then, like how convincing is this as like maybe even more useful than like the Unsettled Mariner for Modern Horizons, or is it just because like this is like an Unsettled Mariner for Pioneer, and that's like a good power level card for Pioneer that we just don't have access to?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily go that the fact that it's better than Mariner, but yeah, like you mentioned, it's just that Pioneer hasn't really had access to that type of card before, and the fact that it's like the Lord plus taxing aspect, you wouldn't necessarily play 2 mana 2/2 for one of those. Like if it was 2 mana 2/2 gave your stuff word 1, or 2 mana 2/2 gave your stuff +1/+0, you wouldn't necessarily play either one of those cards. But the fact that you're paying for both is just awesome. It gives you some more flexibility and stuff like that. I love it.
It's just super main deckable, right? You know what I mean? Like, you don't need the ward all the time, and you always want power, but it's like you said, it seems like it does enough for 2 mana.
Awesome. All right, let's talk about a couple of last things from Pioneer. One is, I know we don't have a lot to say about this, so I'm just going to mention it. Claudio won the challenge on Sunday with Niv to Light. For the first time in a while, we've seen a result with that deck, which is pretty interesting, so check that out.
I will refer to my previous statement that I'm trying to find, but I think I said something along the lines of Claudio can win with anything, so we don't have to look too much into it. But
right.
Shoutouts to Claudio. They're great.
Yeah, Claudio, always interesting. Very, very committed Pioneer player as well. But Niv, maybe dust it off if you love it. But like Devon said, Claudio can win with anything, so good luck.
The one quick thing I will mention, he did have a copy of Niv Mizzet Supreme in the deck.
Right.
I don't know if that card's actually good or if he just wanted to try it out for fun because he loves trying these like weird one-ofs with Bring to Light. No idea if the card's actually good. I still haven't even actually read it, but it has Niv in the name, so you got a Niv Tribal.
Well, I will do a minor spoiler and say it does appear in the top 32 of Sunday's Modern Challenge in a Bring to Light deck as well. So
it does. And
Spoilers.
here's what it does. For what it's worth, it's a 5/5 legendary creature, dragon avatar. I don't need to tell you the casting cost for these later Niv Mizzets. I'll just say they're no longer just red and blue. And it has flying, hexproof from monocolored. And it says each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard that's exactly 2 colors has jumpstart.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah,
Which is
that's actually
interesting.
sick because you have a lot of different 2-color stuff with that you get off Bring to Light and Niv. So
Right.
that card actually might be really good. And it's kind of hard to kill sometimes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is what it is. It's a one of. It's a spicy one of, maybe. Get you a little extra card advantage, essentially. But it was cool to see that happen. And then the last deck that we had talked about with Devon about adding to this episode is a list from Mason Clark that is Soul Flare Neoform. 3 cards that or 3 words that I probably hate the most in Magic. These are some of my least favorite cards in Magic. And when you pair it up with Atraxa Grand Unifier as well, you are really not speaking my language anymore. But here's what's in the deck. There is one card in here that I am not super familiar with that is, what is this? Urborg?
Scavengers?
Scavengers. Yeah, please read it for us, Devon.
All right. I remember this offhand. So it's a 3-mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you exile target card from a graveyard and put a counter on it. And the second line of text has all abilities of whatever that card has. Flying, First Strike, Trample, Lifelink, go down the list. The really nice thing about Scavengers is the first line of text says exile target card from a graveyard, then put a counter on it. So you don't have to exile a creature. It's just any single card. You could exile a card from your. I think it's. I can't remember if it's only your graveyard. I think it hits theirs too. But the point is, you don't have to hit creatures with it for it to get pumped, which is massive because you have like extra lands from milling over with salvage. But the joke here is you're trying to mill over a card called Zetalpa Primal Dawn.
Of course.
Which is,
Yep.
I don't remember the stats on. I know it's 6 dub. I think it's a 4/8. Is that right?
We're
I
looking
think
right
it's
now.
a 4/8. Okay.
One second.
But I know it has
Everything.
It has every ability. So indestructible, flying,
Double
double strike,
Vigilance, Trample.
vigilance, trample. I think.
Yes. It is a 4/8
So-
for 6 white. Elder Dinosaur. Shane and I narrowly lost a
Oh,
team
man.
a team GP
Oh, no.
day 2 winning in when our third player, so I lost this last round, Shane won the last round, and our third player Way was on a like random pile dinosaur
A very
deck that
Way
had
deck.
Zetalpa in it, and he was making it work, and we all had pretty good records all day, but he lost to a top-decked Ripdraw Raptor that took his Zetalpa off the off the battlefield
Oh,
the
boy.
turn before we were going to get the win with it.
Bad beats.
Brutal stuff.
God.
Bad beats.
So Weirborg Scavenger is just like slow flare, right? It's just like build your own soul flare type thing.
Yeah, well, the really nice thing about Urborg Scavengers is you don't have to have a stock graveyard. Right, if you just have one Zetalpa chilling in there, you play an Urborg Scavengers, eat the Zetalpa, you've now made a 3/3 double strike, indestructible,
It's okay.
vigilance, trample,
Could be a fast
fly
flare then.
for 3 mana. So that's not even that bad. But the other half of the deck is like, so it has a bunch of different things going on. So you have that aspect, you have Soul Flare, which for those of you who don't remember that, it's Delve, so it's 4 BB for a 4/4. Delve, and then it has basically the scavenger text where it has all abilities of the cards that you exile with it. So if you exile the Zetalpa, you get a 4/4 with all those abilities. So you have that angle as well. And then on top of all of that, as Dave mentioned, you're still a Neoform deck that has Tasigur, Neoform for Atraxa. So you've kind of combined all of these plans together in this, this beautiful harmony. Maybe Dave
I wouldn't call it beautiful.
harmony, but
Yeah.
I think this looks really sweet.
I will acknowledge it looks sweet, Devon. And Mason, I don't think you listen. We haven't met you before. I've heard you're very nice and very tall. I believe was the Twitter bit
Very
about
tall,
Mason for a while.
extremely tall.
But yes, this is a sweet looking piece of deck building. It's just I will be very sad when I encounter this in the queues.
Yeah, and then just for listeners, for posterity's sake, the enablers here, you have Otherworldly Gaze, Grizzly Salvage, and then for founding the third path to kind of help the mill, and then for the interaction, you have Stubborn Denial and Thoughtseize. So yeah, just like a really sweet deck. I think all the pieces work pretty well together. I was planning on playing this today, but Magic Online downtime. We'll go there at some point. But Probably gonna play it tomorrow.
Yeah, we call that a tease, Devon. After people listen, go back and look at the VOD of Devon playing this deck if it happens, because it's probably gonna happen sometime this week, right?
Yes, I can guarantee you that,
Awesome.
assuming that they're not down again tomorrow.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I
Here's
mean,
hoping.
they got to be able to open cards in Magic Online, or else nothing's gonna work if we can't get cards. So,
yeah.
All right, so that's it for Pioneer. Let's hop on over to Modern, because there's a lot of Modern. We've been talking a lot. I think we can compress it to around the same amount of time. Let's try it. As we mentioned, Saturday's Modern Challenge on May 13th was extremely weird, I think, in a lot of ways. And especially the top 8 was particularly kind of odd for the moment. So we're just going to hop
putting
in.
it lightly.
Yes. it was like a flashback to like 6 years ago in deck titles only. But we'll see where it goes from there. But I do want to talk about the number one thing that got me excited about Magic this weekend was the event-winning list from X-File, also known as Felix Slew, was Sultai, Traverse, Shadow. And as people may not know, Devon, maybe you know, I have spent my time trying to get good at various shadows over the years. Grixis, Jund, 4-color. The last deck that I played before the pandemic hit was at a tournament with Stan where I was playing Shadow with Into the Story. And not Into the Story. What's the green card? Into the Story is the blue card.
Traverse?
No, Traverse plus the free green card from Eldraine. You know, the banned green card from Eldraine.
Once Upon a Time.
Once Upon a Time.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, Once Upon a Time.
That was an okay
Exactly.
card.
Oh, man. I loved that deck for the 3 weeks that I got to play it. So anyway, this is a Sultai Shadow list. We have not seen many Sultai lists over the years. It's weird. It was always sort of like a dream for Shadow players, I think, but the parts never quite came together to make it work. It was always, why aren't you playing Jund? Why aren't you playing Grixis? And even when it was 4-color, it was like, well, it was really more Grixis with a splash of green than it was ever Sultai, I think, in a lot of ways. But this deck, this is a Traverse deck, Traverse the Ulenvold deck. It also features a card called Invasion of Ikoria. So we're going to go through the core a little bit, but these are the things that are going on that are making this deck super weird. So it begins with the core cards you would think of in a 4-color Traverse Shadow deck. You got Death Shadow and Tarmogoyf as your main threats. Then you have Street Wraith and Bauble in the deck, helping you enable Delirium for Traverse and to make Tarmogoyf bigger, all the things that kind of package used to do. This is the first time in a while that I've seen a Death Shadow list do well with Street Wraith in it. You know, there was a time when
Street Wraith.
Yeah, where that was a staple, and then it's been long gone. You know, on top of that, we have Dress Down as well, because that also helps enable Delirium. And then you have your spell suite. You have your Fatal Push, Thoughtseize, Stubborn Denial, etc., etc., etc. But then you have the thing that we've talked about in the past, Traverse the Ulenwald and Invasion of Ikoria, as kind of 2 cards that help you search up your threats and also do some other stuff. I think we all know what Traverse does. Get a land. If you have Delirium, go get a creature. Invasion of Ikoria, Devon, it sounded like you wanted to read it. Do you want to read it? Do you have something to say?
I would love to read it. Well, so let's go ahead and pull it up here. So
I gotta turn my head sideways.
Green, yeah, I know. A little bit of that. Green, X, Battle Siege. When Invasion of Ikoria enters the battlefield, search your library and or graveyard, important line of text, for a non-human creature card with mana value X or less and put it onto the battlefield. If you search, shuffle. And then it has, I think it is
6.
8 defense?
It's got 6 defense,
okay.
yeah.
6 defense. I always forget that number. And then it flips into Zilortha, Apex of Ikoria, which is an 8/8 legendary creature dinosaur with reach. Don't forget about sneaky reach. And then for each non-human creature you control, you may have that creature assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked.
Sweet.
So this one is particularly sick because not only do you get the front side, which finds you all of your threats, the backside is actually kind of sicko when you combine it with Shadow and Dress Down. So you can go Dress Down to make a 13, and then they're taking 13 regardless. It's just it gives you these TBR kind of vibes.
Yeah, although I think if you play with Dress Down, doesn't Zilortha loses its abilities too,
correct.
Right?
Okay.
So you can't quite go for that wombo combo, but that's exactly what the backside of this card is that it is kind of TBR vibes. So in addition to Dress Down, like you said, you do get to play Dress Down like Team or Battle Rage sometimes, where it makes your Death Shadow into a 13/13. You don't want to do it when your Tarmogoyfs are out, of course, but when your Death Shadows are out, that's pretty good. Now, on the flip side, then if you manage to flip over Zilortha, you also can do that similar thing where your Death Shadow attacks, your Tarmogoyf attacks, and it doesn't matter if they're blocked. It doesn't matter if they chump block it. They don't have to have trample to make it work. They don't have to have double strike. You do get that damage either way, and that's generally enough to close out a game, I would think, in Modern in particular right now. It's not too hard to get there.
But Dave, 6 defense, how are we getting that thing flipped as soon as possible?
Well, that's the amazing thing about this deck. I counted 5 at least really cool things that you can do with Invasion of Ikoria on here. The first thing, I'm just going to go through this list, and they go by increasing level of excitement for me. So buckle up. First, this is a battle, so it enables Delirium and your Tarmogoyf as well. Surprise, we can now have, 7, 8 Tarmogoyfs or 8, 9 Tarmogoyfs? Where are we at right now on the Tarmogoyf ticker? 8, 9, I guess.
9, right? 9, 8? No, they still count. Which the old
Tribal.
I forgot.
Tribal.
They still count it.
Yep.
It's weird because it doesn't say it on Atraxa, but it still counts for card types.
Yep, absolutely. So we could get there. So you can make a really big Tarmogoyf thanks to Battle being in this deck too. You can maybe get your Traverse going on with a different count to Delirium. That's a small thing. The second thing that's super interesting, I think, is this is where we get into the spicy one-ofs that are in this deck that I think are really there to exploit how cool of a card Invasion of Ikoria is. One is, there's a one-of Dryad Arbor in this deck. So if you're in trouble and you would like to cast Invasion of Ikoria for green, you can go and get a land and put it into play.
Mm-hmm.
Or put one in from your graveyard. That's pretty nice, right? Not amazing, but that's nice.
Don't tell Spike about the Dryad Arbor, though. He hates that.
He does hate that move.
Can't tell
Yeah,
Spike.
it's true. So let's talk about something that I think he'll approve of more. And that's the third thing on my list, which is there's a one of Grist in this list that you can search up with this if you want. You can also search up Grist with Traverse the Ulenwald, which I don't know if anybody's ever quite thought about that before, but it's pretty sweet to be able to go and get either you want a token for some reason, or more likely you want Grist's minus ability to be able to kill something, which is super, super handy. And then, of course, the Wombo combo that Devon was hinting to earlier is cast Invasion of Ikoria for 4, go and get Vampire Hexmage, sacrifice Vampire Hexmage, remove all the counters from Invasion of Ikoria, immediately flip over and have your giant dinosaur on the back. So you can do a 4-mana 8/8 that has reach and this wild super trample ability right there, and just tutor it up from a single card, which I think is really interesting deck building and a nice way to bring back a card that I think people were looking at with battles, but also like a card that's just been hovering around in Modern for a while without a place to do something cool.
And the sick part about that is you can already have a Death Shadow or a Tarmogoyf in play.
Mm-hmm.
So if you curve out and you have you do that, you go Shadow on 3 or Goyf on 2, Shadow on 3, and then you just do this on 4, you have 2 creatures in play that may or may not even just present lethal regardless if they have blockers.
Exactly. Yep.
That's wild.
This is beautiful deck building.
It really is.
To me, this is beautiful. Felix, if you're out there.
Bravo.
I mean, this feels like it does the things that Death Shadow decks do well, which is both present aggression and grindiness, because like Devon was focusing on earlier, Invasion of Ikoria can get stuff back out of your graveyard as well. So like, you top deck an Invasion of Ikoria, and you can be off to the races pretty efficiently if you don't have some kind of board state. If you do have a board state, you're likely putting yourself into a really strong position. You have flexibility in the Grist, in the Dryad Arbor, in the threats you want to present. And like Devon was saying before, is dress down can, and you were saying, Dave, is dress down can be awesome for Death Shadow, can be bad for Tarmogoyf, can be great for killing a random construct or stopping the opponent. The things that dress down does really well.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the kind of decks that, if they're in a position to not get completely hosed out of the metagame, that historically Death Shadow has done so well, and I think we're at a time right now, perhaps just because of Invasion of Ikoria, that it can do well again, and clearly it did here.
Well, here's the thing that I like the best about this in some ways is, I was playing Grixis Death Shadow not, a year ago or so. When we went to Dallas, I was playing that deck. And, it's fine in the meta, but the best version of Grixis has Ragavan and has Deathrite Shaman in it. And it's like, Murktide is really
Deathrite
just...
Shaman.
Or sorry, I always call that card Dragon's Rage Channeler instead of Deathrite Shaman.
Wait, did they unban Deathrite Shaman?
We wish it had Deathrite Shaman in it. I've done that so many times over the years. All right, anyway, Dragon's Rage Channeler. Those are the best cards that are in in the deck with it. And Murktide is just probably a better shell for those cards anyway. But what this does, which is like a real corner case, is that this eases up on your reliance on 1-drops to fuel your plan, so you don't die to something that kills a bunch of 1-drops like a Blast Zone or an Engineered Explosives. It also, you have some reliance on the graveyard, but it's not terrible if Traverse and Tarmogoyf don't go off because you don't have Delirium, basically because Death Shadow is okay and Invasion of Ikoria is okay in that space. So I feel like it's a little less reliant on like any particular zone of hate right off the bat. I'm sure that there's a zillion matchups that are bad for a deck like this. I have to think about it a little bit, but it doesn't have that kind of like super clear hate that kind of works against Death Shadow sometimes.
Yeah, I just thought of something too. Random shower thought. I don't want to give you guys nightmares, but can you imagine if Lurrus was legal in this deck and you got to Lurrus loop with Hexmage Ikoria and just like do that over and over again? Oh god.
I can only dream.
Rest in peace, Lurrus. You'll sorely be missed.
Exactly. Still sorely missed.
In
All
the
right.
arms of an angel.
We already did that for Lurrus like many times. All right. So that was one of the most interesting headlines, but there was something else super wild about this challenge, and that is that this top 8 had 3 Hardened Scales lists in it. 3 of them.
Yep.
Count them.
Top 8. 3.
That's a lot.
3, top 8, and it's all thanks to, we believe, friend of the show, Aspiring Spike, right? Who was 7-0 in this list going into the top 8. You guys told me that Everett has been playing Mono Green Scales a good amount lately in Modern, and that might have been what led him to play it in this challenge and also for a bunch of other people to pick it up too.
Yeah, I saw him. I think he played in like maybe this, is there a super challenge last weekend or something like that? Showcase challenge, that's what I meant. And I remember he had a VOD up of that recently. I think he went like 5-3 with it, but the deck, looked pretty strong. And, anything that Spike plays does, he does impact the meta, and I think we are finally seeing people start respecting this deck again, and also respecting Ozolith the Shattered Spire.
That's right. Yeah, let me read Ozolith the Shattered Spire to you. So it's a generic and a green for a legendary artifact that says if one or more +1/+1 counters will be put on an artifact or creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put on it instead. And then it has an activated ability of a generic, a green, and tap to put a +1/+1 counter on target artifact or creature you control, activate only as a sorcery. And then it also has cycling 2, as if they couldn't fit enough text on this card. So this card is just a redundant Hardened Scales. Yeah.
But artifact or creature you control.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes the Ozolith itself a ton better. So it's just like, it costs more than both the Ozolith and Hardened Scales, but it gives you a little bit more and, offers flexibility, offers a mana sink.
Yeah, the really nice thing about the Shattered Spire too is it kind of gets the party started by itself, right? If you're kind of out of gas, you just you put that thing with the scales in play. You just put 3-4 counters on something, and it just kind of like it gets the party started. Also, obviously absurd with like Ravager and stuff, Ballista. The Scales deck is great, absolutely great.
It's just it's a tough deck, and I think that's one reason that people are going to see some success with it right now too. Right? Is like, if I was facing this down, I'd be like, crap, I don't remember how to do anything with this. Like, am I going to really be looking at all these cards and trying to like visualize the same lines my experienced opponent is? It's like, at the LGS, probably not. I'm just going to F6, be like, yeah, you do you, my friend. I'm just going to try to do my thing and you do your thing. And like, there was a funny comment I saw. Yeah, am I dead? I saw this funny comment on Reddit by this person named username Rob, and they were like, I was on Team of Rhinos this weekend. I got wrecked by Scales. It's never shown up on my LGS, and I've never played against it, never learned any lines of play. It was like studying science for your history final. I did not understand the assignment. And it's like, yeah, that's me. I don't know.
The other funny thing about Scales is I remember you mentioned that Spike was streaming a lot of this deck, and you could the classic chat lethal where everybody in chat is like, oh, you have lethal this turn, and then 10 seconds later everybody's like, oh no, whoops, I did the math wrong. So yeah, this is a really good deck if you're looking to stream some and get some good content that way.
Yeah, I feel like this is the deck that everyone's like trying to find the line as fast as possible to like help streamer out, but like, it just takes time. You got to sit there, count some things, And I feel like it really rewards play experience. And like I don't think a lot of people have that right now, unless they're dedicated scales people.
Someone called Gall.
Let's get Gall back on the
Gall
line.
Schlesinger back. First guest on the Dive Down, Yama Killer, talking about scales.
And it's
All
still
right.
here, 4 years later.
Yama.
Yeah.
4
Three of
years
these.
later.
Just a reminder, 3 of these in the top 8. Okay,
Yes.
number 3. This is a smaller one. This is a little smaller story, but I thought this was really funny and interesting and weird. And that is that there were 2 creativity decks in the top 8. One was a 4C build without blue, running Lingering Souls. Friends. It was running Lingering Souls. So it was basically a Mardu kind of deck that was also playing Ren and 6, of course, because Ren and 6 is incredibly good in this deck in creativity. But yes, running a 4 of Lingering Souls, I guess to make tokens or just to grind people out like it's, 2013. But
Yeah,
I thought
mean,
this was a really cool piece of deck building.
Turn 3 Lingering Souls, turn 4 Creativity, just fire it up. The other funny thing about this top 8 is you talk about, Sultai Shadow in first place, and then we also got Lingering Souls in the top 8. Like, is this from 2016? Like, did I time travel?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
And Hardened Scales, too. Extra
Yeah,
time
Scales, too.
traveling there. Yeah. Yeah. I love this list from Other White Stuff, is the name of the player who had it. It's got your Bitter Reunion package, Fable of the Mirror Breaker as a 4 of, which always warms my heart to see as a 4 of in Modern. Ren and 6, Archon of Cruelty. This has it has some persist plan too, so it's got 3 persist. So it's that combination of kind of Bitter Reunion, put it in the graveyard, get it with creativity, get it back, like all the stuff that kind of people with this kind of vibe do. But the Lingering Souls is just an interesting move to, get tokens faster, get value off of the discard trigger from Fable, be able to grind. I don't know how I don't think the shell is really equipped to try to win a game with a bunch of Lingering Souls tokens, but maybe, just maybe, you get there sometimes. Dwarves and ghosts, just like in Lord of the Rings, am I right?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's like sort of maybe a plan against the scam decks where it's, they're trying to grind and stuff like that. But if, the scam deck has Dothy Voidwalker, which we may or may not get to a scam list at some point that may or may not have Dothy Voidwalker, but if they have it, it's kind of awkward because you don't get the value in the flashback. But this list looks pretty clean. I like it a lot.
Yeah, really cool. We're going straight to the list without Dothy Voidwalker after this because the pilot of that list, Devon, the pilot of that list to add to the people in this top 8, Willie Adel made this top 8 as well. Haven't heard that name too much lately. Not going to talk about it
since 2016
in depth. Yes, exactly. More 2016 vibes. Willie Adel was playing Scam, as you mentioned, and in place of Voidwalker, Willie was playing 4 Blood Tithe Harvesters in Modern. Blood Tithe Harvester making its way from Rakdos Sack in Pioneer to Modern.
Why?
How?
Did he
Why?
accidentally register with his Pioneer deck in the Modern Challenge and just beat everybody with it? I don't think so.
He still had his elementals, so I don't think I think he was okay. He still had his evoke elementals. I don't know.
This does play 16 other Horizons only creatures, so
exactly.
I think it's just maybe a deck reg error.
I figured it out. So there's a limit to how many Horizons cards you can put in your deck because Willie's kind of like the classic boomer, like us, classic boomer mindset. So maybe he has this is a cap on how many Horizons cards I can play, and because Voidwalker's from Horizons, he's like, well, this one's on the chopping block. Maybe that's what it is.
Yep.
Yeah, quarter of the deck only.
So honestly, this is the only thing I could think of. And tell me what you all think about this. So one is maybe a blood token isn't the worst thing in the world in a deck that has some dead cards in the mid game. If you draw a Feign Death at the wrong time, if you draw the other one, that's name I forget, at the wrong time, maybe it's nice to discard it and draw a card with it. The other thing is, if you have a Blood Tithe guy out, Blood Tithe, what is it again? Harvester. I always forget that name. Blood Tithe Harvester, and you have a Feign Death, you can kill a 2/2 with it, 2 2/2s with it, right? Or a 2/2 and a 4/4 with it, I guess, because you can sacrifice the Harvester, then you can play Feign Death on it, sacrifice it, bring it back, get another blood token, and then be ready to kill another creature with your Blood Tithe Harvester.
You can actually kill 2 4/4s with this because what happens is you Feign Death the Harvester, and then you sacrifice the Harvester. The ability of the Harvester goes in the stack, but the Feign Death goes in the stack first. So you actually get the Harvester back, which just gets you the second blood token, and then the ability resolves. So you can actually kill an X4, and then on the following turn, you have a Harvester with 2 blood to also kill another X4.
Right.
So that's and I've known this because I've actually been playing some like Blood Scythe Harvester, Feign Death type decks in Pioneer, messing around with that. So that's how I knew that. That's how I realized that interaction.
Man, the stack is cool.
It is, yeah. One thing I was thinking is that maybe you would Harvester over Dauthi Voidwalker to make your mana constraints a little bit better if you have main deck Blood Moon, but then looking at Willie's list in particular, the Blood Moons are in the sideboard, so yeah, it's really weird. Maybe you just figured that you want a little bit more removal. I guess the other upside is that Harvester pitches to Fury and Grief, so maybe the 2-drops are close enough on power level that you'd rather just have the gold card that pitches to both.
These are all great little corner cases that I think make sense for why you would try it. I do think the big one is wanting extra creature removal for some reason. Like that's what I kind of intuited from the choice here. I mean, maybe it's just like you said, maybe they were too expensive or they're boring or something like that. You know, we're right at that 592 tickets. Maybe somebody has a Mana Traders limit and Dauthi Voidwalker took you over it, and this was just a try. But I can see both of those things as being why it pitches to either elemental, and it lets you do a lot of extra creature removal if you want to. It's very slow for Modern, I would think, but you know what? I didn't top 8 a challenge.
4 Terminate's kind of a lot, huh? Is that stock nowadays? I feel like that's a lot.
I think it's a lot.
He shaved on the Fatal Push and is focusing more. He has like 1 more Bolt and 1 or 2 more Terminates than typical. No Fatal Push main.
Yeah.
Adel's gonna Adel. He's got to play the old school Fatal Push and Terminate.
It's a cool list though, and props to Willie Adel for being there.
What else do you notice in this top 32, Dave? Anything cool?
Yes. So there are a couple of things. So we've talked about a couple of new cards, and I have a few other new cards to talk about here in the top 32, including one that we already talked about in Coppercoat Vanguard. But I'm going to start with Young Dingo and what Young Dingo is up to lately. Young Dingo, well-known player, one of the people who popularized Scam in a lot of ways, I would say. Young Dingo has been trying a new 4-color Omnath build with 3 Nissa Resurgent Animist in it.
Yeah.
And Elemental, I will say, Young Dingo came in 3rd in Friday's challenge, the 512 challenge with this list, and came in 14th in this challenge with this list. I mean, it's the control style shell, right? So it's your Omnath, a couple of Elish Norns, a couple Fury, 4 Solitude, Eldamri's Call, all the Planeswalkers, all the Leyline Buying, all the prismatic endings. It's that style of deck. It's not the super elemental heavy version of it, but it's enough elementals that Nissa can help you search up cards when you get that double landfall trigger. And so it just seems like maybe the Lotus Cobra plus go get a card effect with fetch lands is exactly what this shell fits in the shell anyway. I'm not so sure if it's exactly what it needed, but it fits in this shell to be able to do the 2 things that this deck likes to do, and that is ramp, get the mana it needs, and get extra cards.
Yeah, it's kind of tempting to be like, yeah, you play this in like the elemental heavy version, but you can also just play it in, because it's random what you're getting off the top. Why not just play the really good elementals like Omnath and Fury and Solitude?
Yeah.
Yeah, Nissa seems particularly powerful. Just the natural curve of, play it on 3, turn 4, play a fetch land, crack it. You have mana to play Omnath, and you can play the Omnath. You can hit a Fury or a Solitude off of the Nissa trigger. Just really, lots of good value there. The body's nice because it blocks Ragavan, doesn't that a red and 6? So yeah, I mean it potentially is here to stay. I know that Dingo really liked the card, so potentially pretty good.
Yep,
sweet.
Yep, I think it's pretty good. A couple other things really quickly before we get into the last main chapter of this. In 15th place, we had a player named... 15th place, we had a player named MTG Lucas on a green-white death and taxes list. The thing that was interesting to me about this is that it has Malira from Phyrexia All Will Be One in it, but it also has 4 Deeproot Wayfinder, which is from...
Mm-hmm.
Is that from March? That's from March of the Machine.
March.
Yeah, not from
Aftermath. That's from Mom.
But it's a card that has Explorer, or at least a version of Explorer. And it is, really quickly, I'll read it. It's a 2/3 for a colorless, and a green. For whenever Deeproot Wayfinder deals combat damage to a player or battle, surveil 1, then you may return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So it does a surveil, which is pretty cool. It seems like it's good rates, and then you just be able to get extra cards, maybe ramp a little bit, and kind of go from there in your kind of normal taxes shell. I thought it was interesting to see.
Real quick on the Deeproot Wayfinder, the really cool thing about that is you can get back Ghost Quarter, so in combination with Lean and Arbiter, you can kind of re-Ghost Quarter people, so that's kind of sick.
There you go. That's the big unlock. So you can get back Ghost Quarter. You can also get back, I'm going to build off what you said, Devon. You can also get back Horizon Canopy if you'd like to and draw extra cards off of it. Or Boseiju if you want to Boseiju extra stuff. So it's doing like a little bit of a light Ren and 6 kind of vibe here.
Oh, because there's 4 Boseijus. That makes a lot of sense. You can aggressively Boseiju and then get it back with Wayfinder. That's really cool.
Yep. So that's some interesting stuff building here. Taxes is a deck list or a deck style that I think a lot of people would love to see be good in Modern. We'll see. I don't know if this is enough to get it there, and Death and Taxes is like the ultimate specialist deck, but it's a cool list to see. 19th place, we had a Bant control list by someone named Clockwork Dean. The thing I wanted to talk about this list is it's Bant control that got a 5/2, wild, but it has 3 of a card from Aftermath called Cosmic Rebirth.
Man, I mean, I almost wanted to talk about this in our episode last week, but it's just like, this does not seem good enough, but clearly if you have enough time, anything is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's 1 green, white instant, choose target permanent card in your graveyard. If it has mana value 3 or less, you may put it onto the battlefield. If you don't put it onto the battlefield, put it into your hand, you gain 3 life. So it sounds like it has to be targeting something with mana value 3 or less. That is not the case. If it's mana value 4 or more, it goes into your hand, and you always gain the 3 life. So it's just like a little like recursion effect, but putting something onto the battlefield, no slouch there.
Yeah, the really sick thing with Cosmic Rebirth, and this is a Riot and Boys podcast, so I don't want to make you guys feel too sad, but I watched somebody cast a Crashing Footfall or a Shardless Agent, and in response to the Cascade trigger, their opponent Cosmic Rebirth at the fairy back into play. And yeah,
not like this.
Well,
instant speed. Oh, it's brutal.
At instant speed.
Yeah, that is sort of what I was imagining. Is that you're targeting to fairy with this, like an inordinate amount of time at instant speed.
That's the main target.
Yeah.
Even Narset, can you imagine your opponent goes to I don't know, maybe not Jace Brainstorm, but they cast some kind of card draw spell, and you just instant speed put the Narset into play?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I can definitely imagine it. Am I going to try this deck, Devon? I am not. But I love it, and for the people who like to play Control, I say good on you.
It's got Dazen doing too, obviously. With
Narsets. Gotta love it. That one of the things that blew my mind the most about Magic over the last few years is that combo is good enough for Legacy, but not good enough for Modern. It's very, very interesting.
That's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, very interesting. We have a Niv Mizzet list, as we talked about. Shane has another one to talk about later, so I'm not going to mention too much more about that. We'll go move along. The last thing I want to talk about in the context of this challenge is an Azorius Humans list by Big Dan in 24th place that features 4 Coppercoat Vanguard. So this is only a 4/3 list out of the challenge because it's kind of low in the results, but still, congrats to Big Dan for getting there. This is a list that has Unsettled Mariner, Reflector Mage, Adeline, Thalia's Lieutenant, Coppercoat Vanguard, Meddling Mage, Esper Sentinel, Champion of the Parish. It looks, it's like a refined version of the Humans list that we used to be so, familiar with in past years. It doesn't have any ramp anymore. It doesn't do any of that kind of stuff. It's just blue and white cards. But this was only one of 3 different decks that I saw Coppercoat Vanguard in Modern as well. So I saw, in addition to this list, I saw a 5/0 from a player named Je ne sais quoi, and a second list in a 3/1 prelim by Parrotlet. And these were both lists that were much more close to the Hank the Obese mono white list that were floating around over the last couple of months that were just like, we're going to use Shining Shoal, we're going to use Emeria to be able to have extra white cards to pitch to Solitude. And so I think Coppercoat, I wanted to bring this up just in the sense that, Devon was really high on Coppercoat Vanguard in Pioneer. I think that people are really going for it in Modern as well in a lot of different ways because it's good against Fury and a number of different things as well. But it kind of means that you have to, if you're going to Fury someone's small creature deck, you have to put your first Fury all into Coppercoat Vanguard, and then you'll get a chance to do the second part of it. And sometimes you just don't have time to do that, or you don't have the cards to be able to pitch. And so it was pretty interesting to see that pop up as well.
Yeah, there's like you said, public enemy number one is Fury. So any card that kind of gets helps you a little bit, mitigate the Fury a little bit. Like even this list that we were talking, the Azorius one, the fact that you have Mariner and Vanguard, like you have a lot of a lot of insulation against Fury. So yeah, Vanguard is here to stay. That card's really good, and it does make a lot of sense, like in the Hank the Beast list too, because they're playing the same one drop Sentinel and Champion of the Parish, but then they're trying to curve up a little bit, and then you kind of have like the Shoals and the Vanguards to insulate you against Fury. So it's like you have this humans deck that just almost doesn't even care about Fury anymore.
Yeah. I don't think that's true in practice, for what it's worth, but we'll see. I want to try it. Like I played the Hank the Obese list. I do think that Coppercoat Vanguard, for example, I know that they're still playing like Luminarch Aspirant in those lists, even the ones from this weekend from Parrotlet and Genesis. Like I always felt like that was a card that wasn't quite good enough for Modern. Looks like actually Parrotlet does not have Luminarch Aspirant in it, so I think that makes a little bit more sense. They're also trying things like Anointed Peacekeeper to add extra taxing effects to things. So if you can play Anointed Peacekeeper and say keep your Furies in your hands, it's going to cost extra to be able to play them. Like that's another thing that you can do. So I think that there's a lot of different things going on here that are pretty interesting with humans in Modern right now.
It's tax season, baby.
That sure is. It sure is.
This is sweet. Yeah, this is real sweet.
All right.
Well, that's a lot from the Saturday challenge. Yes. I think Sunday was less interesting, but I did go down the rabbit hole trying to see what's going on in the Sunday's challenge. We're not going to go through all of this hardly at all, of course, but there's some novel stuff. I will quickly note we saw 0 Hardened Scales in the entire top 32.
Come on.
After 3 in the top 8 of Saturday. And also, the winner of this was Wang Sai on Burn with 2 main deck Roiling Vortex. Stan was right yet again. Main deck Roiling Vortex is just where we're at in Modern. No Eidolon's main at all. And this is what Burn's going to have to do if it's going to try to win a tournament now and then. So good on Wang Sai for changing things up a little bit. I think that's kind of been a little bit of a trend recently, but we haven't really had much reason to talk about Burn because it's not really doing much, but we see it here.
Yep.
We're gonna have to edit that part out, by the way, because we can't tell Stan he was right.
He was right about the Coppercoat because I was going to skip over it, and he put it in the notes. I'm so embarrassed.
I wouldn't have let you skip over that card if I had been here, for what it's worth. That was like one of 4 cards on my list for Aftermath.
I put in the other 2 2-mana humans, but not that 2-mana human. I did want to point out third place Racerman on Rhinos. The Murktide Regent and Mystical Dispute build is basically stock. And there were 3 Rhinos in the top 8 alone. All had some slight iteration on kind of like the new build of the new stock build of Rhinos with like the Mystical Disputes of some number. And yeah, sweet, cool. I love seeing 3 Rhinos in the top 8 replacing all of those Hardened Scales. I did notice Bob 49's back running Belcher in 4th place, and Bob had 2 Reckless Handling in the main deck.
That's a spicy one.
Which is like, man, I look at this and I'm like, really? But it's a 1-in-a-rent sorcery. You search your library for an artifact, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle, then discard a card at random. If an artifact card was discarded this way, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So, yeah, I guess it's just a way of tutoring up your artifacts when needed, I guess, right? The Goblin Charbelcher?
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love a good gamble? I've cast my fair share of the card Gamble in Legacy. This one costs 2 mana, but if you ever spend 2 mana and deal your opponent 2 damage, you probably lost the game. So it is what it is. You just gotta know when you're running good, and when the time is right, you just fire it off and pray.
I mean, it's probably 1 out of 7, right? Like it's probably never
that's
worse
true.
Odds than 1 out of 7, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, sometimes you have to generate if you for example, you need to cast this and still have 2 mana floating,
Mm-hmm.
So you won't be able to if you have 2 lands and 2 rituals, say you have to go ritual, then this with 2 floating or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So not always, but maybe it's in the situation where you're just casting this and then passing. that maybe that could come up. But it's a cool card for sure. I like it a lot.
Perfect card for this style of deck, right?
Oh yeah.
A deck I did want to talk about though is 11th place out of the top 8, but we have Cherry X-Man on what I'm going to call Yargle's Vengeance, which is just like this Asmo Goryo's Vengeance deck that has 4 Kragenwick Cremator and 4 Yargle and Multani. So Kragenwick Cremator, if you're not in the Cremator crew, it's 2 red for a 5/4 giant shaman, and when it ETBs, you discard a card at random. If you discard a creature card this way, Cremator deals damage equal to that card's power to target player or planeswalker if you need to take 18 tokens off 18 counters off your opponent's planeswalker. And Yargle and Matani is 3 black, green. It's a legendary Frog Spirit Elemental, 18/6.
You don't need to read this card, Shane. We all know Yargle
18/6.
and Multani.
Wait. No, there's a mistake. You forgot to put the flavor text in the show notes, okay? Do we have to read the flavor text to the listeners?
I don't remember what it is.
We're good, Devon. Unless you just want to go blah.
What's up, Yargle? Anyway, so yeah, you know what you do with this. You can dome your opponent for 18 if you set it up correctly, where you have Yargle Matani in hand. If you have Emrakul in hand, you can do a cool 15. You can just Goryo's Vengeance this back with haste if you want.
I am curious to know how many wins Cherry X-Man got by Goryo's Vengeancing Yargle and Multani. I want to believe that the number was less than or more than 0, but
I mean, Yargle has no abilities. It has no trample.
Nothing.
It just says
It just glue your opponent,
It's beautiful. How are we minimizing the randomness somehow through this deck? So that we know that we're discarding Yargle and Multani? I don't see any cards that help with that. Am I wrong?
I mean, there's a lot of ways to discard stuff. Like you can
dump your hand in Cookbook.
Yeah.
Not maybe one at a time, but you could Thoughtseize yourself.
Yes,
you
exactly.
Dump your hand in Cookbook.
Okay.
So you could do some cool stuff that way to make the Cremator. I mean, it is kind of awkward that you can't Goryo's the Cremator, so you kind of you have to get the 4 mana. But yeah, this deck's super cool. Like the fact that it has the Cremator Yargle angle, it has Goryo's Emrakul angle. There's a lot of cool stuff. It has Profane Tutor to kind of tie the room together. It's an Asmo deck. A lot of cool stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this one's neat. I'm sure I would be terrible at it, but it's definitely neat. The only other thing I really noticed here was a 32nd place Yamada on 80 card Bring to Light for no good reason. And again, this deck is playing Niv Mizzet Supreme as well. Makes total sense in this style of deck, like, a multicolor Bring to Light deck, go for it. But yeah, I mean, definitely not as interesting or as cool, but there's still some new stuff happening. People, winning in challenges with the, Yargle's Vengeance, so...
For the listeners at home, Shane had asked me what the reasoning for playing 80 cards was, and my only response was Cloud.
Flex.
At this point. Yeah,
I can't think of anything else either. Like, what are we doing at this point? Yeah.
So yeah, that's what's going on. I mean, I wish I was able to get some more games in the Magic Online, but we had some technical difficulties. But thankfully, enough other people got some games in that we didn't. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen when we have more access to the Aftermath cards in the coming week, and I think we might see even more impact. Like, I'm looking forward to, just testing out some of these decks myself, maybe some Sleeve Believe Heave style stuff, or just continuing to, give people updates on what the heck's going on in the meta.
Yeah, it was a weird week because, the whole set release, I don't know if you want to get into this, but the whole set release was kind of just a mess.
Yeah.
Where it was released a day early on Arena, and then they felt bad, so they released it a day early on Magic Online. Nobody had cards. You couldn't even get them from GoatBots. Mana Trader still doesn't have them. It's just it feels like this whole set release has just been a giant mess.
Not to mention the fact that a lot of people are just apparently not buying this set in paper either. So it might be a mess on a bunch of levels that aren't just related to the digital side of Magic too. But this tiny set thing experiments. I don't know, team. We'll see if we come back to it.
Yeah, I'm concerned because I wonder how long in advance they have to get all of their ducks in a row. So, are we going to see other sort of Aftermathy style things that pop up, and we're going to deal with those again too? I'm sure there's probably one or two in the works.
Devon, what are you most excited to get into before we get out of here this week? So what's the next step on your list?
Well, I still have the decks rented from today that I didn't get to play. So I'm going to finish up my league with, I think I had mentioned this to you earlier. I want to try Calyx in the Enigmatic deck. Right. So I actually played 3 matches with that. And then I'm going to play Coppercoat in mono white and black white. And then I'm also going to try the Urborg Scavenger deck tomorrow.
Awesome.
Okay, look, if Calyx is actually good, then that's another point for Stan, and I'm not sure I can handle his score being run up this well.
Okay, never mind. We'll cancel that. I'm not playing it tomorrow.
No, I'm actually fascinated to see if it's going to do well.
Shane, where are you at after this? What do you want to play?
Man, I mean, like I said, I got the 3 obs, and I want to play some more. Like, one, I still do want to get good or like get adequate at like understanding the lines and strategies of sacrifice decks more. And the only way I'm going to do that is by playing it more. And so, I might as well just keep experimenting with Ob, see how I feel about it. I don't think a lot of people have really a ton of reps with it yet. So I'll be one of those people out there giving it a go.
All right. And for me, in case this shouldn't surprise anybody, but I will definitely be playing Invasion of Ikoria, doing some shadow stuff.
I can't wait to hear your thoughts on that, Dave. It seems like such a Dave deck.
Oh yeah, I love it.
I now that you mention it, I might actually get back into. I might have to dabble a little bit into Modern with the Yargle deck.
Oh man,
that deck is kind of a bang.
That'll be really good for stream. That's a lot of stream equity.
It is.
Stream equity. Next week we're going to talk about how to maximize your stream equity with Devon. Bring him on and give us some tips.
Speaking of Devon, where can people find your daily content creations?
Twitch.tv/d00mwake, and it's the same moniker on Twitter and YouTube as well.
Awesome. Well, we will be watching what's going on with your Modern maybe playing next week. But that wraps up this week's show. If you haven't, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts, because then you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. And if you want to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating or something like that, please feel free. If you want to shoot a question our way, if you want to reach out to us, you can tweet us at The Dive Down or email thedivedown@gmail.com. If you want to support us, you can join the Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown or check out our merch store at thedivedown.com/store. Of course, if you rent cards on Magic Online or you just want to rent cards on Magic Online, you can sign up at manatraders.com using the code TheDiveDown2023 gets you 10% off your first 2 months. And, of course, our friends over at Barrister and Mann, you can use code TheDiveDown2023 as well for 15% off your first order there. And Nerd Rage Gaming gives all of our listeners 8% off their order with the code DIVE8. Of course, thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and